Now I know that most of you are seldom more than just a few feet away from your cell phone. But remember, they haven't been around all that long. As a matter of fact, soon after the invention of the telephone in 1874, miners were using them in Nova Scotia, Canada. Now in years past, when telephone calls were made, they were connected call by call at switchboards, just like this one. Now in the early years, men were hired to fill the positions, but within a year, customers were complaining that they sounded too harsh, and quite frankly, they were just downright rude. And so then women were hired to fill those positions. So we can see that being polite and having a good attitude is an important part of communication. And there are other ways that we communicate without making sounds. Hand signals, for example. On my trip of exploration, we use hand signals to communicate with each other just like miners in underground mines had to in the past and still do today. Now, a teacher may use a hand signal if he or she wants you to be quiet, right? And also, am I right, at ball games, sometimes hand signals are used to convey we're number one, we're number one. And coal miners still have to use hand signals in coal camps if it's too noisy to be heard. They did it in the past, they still do it today. And there was another type of communication that miners used in the underground mines. They would take caged canaries down into the mine with them. You see, canaries sing a lot, and so if there was a dangerous gas that was developing in the mine, it would kill them, of course, before it would the miners because the birds were so much smaller.
Methane gas is not green. It's actually colorless and odorless. We portrayed it as a nasty green gas to give you an idea of just how nasty it really is.
So if the canaries stopped singing, then the miners cleared out of there right away because they knew there was a presence of either carbon monoxide or methane. Now, this was communication that could be both seen and heard, or perhaps I should say, not heard. And these birds were known as miners' canaries. This was true in coal camps everywhere.
Poor canaries, but I guess it was necessary to keep the miners alive.
Miss Rowe, I have a question.
Go ahead, I'm listening.
I overheard my dad and uncle talking one time, and one of them said something about mine signal bells. What's that?
Good question, and one that fits right in with communication. Some mines had a platform with a large cage on it, and the miners rode in and out of the mines on it.
Kind of like an elevator?
Just like an elevator. It was called a hoist. The signal bell was on the outside of the mines, and when the miners were ready to be lifted up, they would pull a cord that would sound a whistle. The signal for coming up was 3 whistles, and the miners on the outside of the mines would not lift the cage until they had heard all 3 whistles.
What if they didn't wait for 3? Yeah, what if they started raising the cage after 2 whistles?
Well, what might happen if someone was stepping onto the cage as it was being lifted up?
Well, I guess they might lose their balance, fall backwards, and they might get hurt.
Quite possibly. And that's why it was important that they knew what the signals meant and they used them correctly.
Like pit crew members for a race car. It wouldn't be good if the crew chief signaled the race car driver to go on, but then one of the crew members was still changing a tire.
No, it wouldn't. But you just made an excellent comparison.
So communication can be both visual and verbal. Now, verbal are the actual words that are spoken, and vocal is a part of that. The tone, the pause, the pitches, and the rate with which the words are spoken. Let me give you an example of that. Remember I mentioned earlier that one of my fellow explorers, Ambrose Powell, was bit in the knee by a bear. And how do you suppose he expressed that? My knee! The bear bit me! Or perhaps, my knee! The bear bit me! I think you'll choose the second way. Now that day, I think Ambrose expressed his true feelings. But there are times where, in some situations, people don't actually express what they're really feeling.
Children, can you think of a time when you have said or written something, but you really weren't expressing your true feelings?
You mean that time when I had to write a thank you note to my aunt for a Christmas present, but I really didn't feel like it?
Maybe. Why didn't you feel like it?
Socks. Have you ever got socks for Christmas?
Actually, I don't think so.
You see?
Good example. Does anyone else have another one?
I can. A few weeks ago, my dad got a speeding ticket. He was real nice to the trooper. When the trooper left, he said some other stuff.
Another good example.
I'll bet state troopers say things to each other that they don't say to the people they pull over.
I bet you're right. It's also important when using signals, there's a common understanding of what the signals stand for. Whenever people work together, if they're going to be successful as a team, they have to cooperate. And part of that is to communicate effectively.
And there are other factors that affect communication. On our trip, some mornings the fog was so thick that we could barely see each other. It was especially important that we have good communication then to avoid the chances of someone becoming hurt or lost. Communication between Earth and Mars will have distinct challenges. One unique communication problem on Mars is that because of its distance from Earth, it takes 20 to 40 minutes for a message from Earth to reach Mars and vice versa. So that means that on a transmission from the time it is sent until an answer is received, a total of 40 to 80 minutes has elapsed. Now that could be an issue if, say, a Mars commander needs an immediate answer to a question, or if the Earth Command Center wants to get some information right away up to Mars.